Hey everyone. So, if you're building anything with AI, you know the feeling watching those tokens add up. Every single one counts, right? They add up to real money and they add up to real-time delays. So, today, we're going to dive into a brand new format that's making a pretty bold promise to make our chats with AI not just way cheaper, but a whole lot smarter too.
Okay, let's just jump right into the deep end here. Take a look at the screen. On the left, you've got your standard everyday JSON array. On the right, the exact same data, but in this new format called TOON. Now look at the numbers. The JSON version, 89 tokens. The TOON version, just 45. That is almost a 50% reduction. So the big questions are, how is that even possible? And maybe more importantly, why should you care?
Well, the problem is something we could call a hidden JSON tax. Look, JSON is the language of the web. It's awesome, it's everywhere, but let's be honest, it can be a little chatty. Every single repeated key, every bracket, every quote mark, that's a token. Now, if you're making one API call, you're not going to notice. But what happens when you scale up to thousands or millions of calls? That tax compounds into some very real costs and some really frustrating latency.
And that brings us to TONE, which stands for Token-Oriented Object Notation. Now, this isn't about replacing JSON across the board. Think of it more like a specialized tool for a very specific job, choosing the most efficient language possible when you're talking directly to an AI, especially when you're doing it a lot. And it's pretty clever, actually. It borrows the best ideas from formats we already know and love, like the clean look of YAML and the raw efficiency of CSV.
For really simple objects, the difference is immediately obvious. It looks a whole lot like YAML, right? No curly braces, no quotes around the keys. It's a small change, for sure, but it's a nice little token saving right off the bat.
Nesting things is also super straightforward. It just uses simple indentation. Again, exactly like YAML. It's clean, it's really easy to read. But, and this is a big but, these little tweaks are not where we get those massive 50% savings we saw a minute ago. The real power is hidden somewhere else.
So what is TOON's superpower? What's the secret sauce?
It all comes down to one key feature that completely changes the game when you're sending structured data to a large language model. And here it is. The magic is in something called tabular arrays. So instead of repeating your field names, ID, name, role, for every single item in a long list, TOON lets you declare the rules, the headers, just once, right at the top. And then you just list out the data. That's it.
And this example just illustrates the difference perfectly. On the left, you see the JSON. It's repeating ID, name, and repo over and over and over again. Now look at the right. With TOON, you declare those headers exactly one time, and then you just stream the values row by row. It's such a simple idea, but the impact is massive. And that one feature leads to some seriously impressive claims. We're talking token savings of anywhere from 30 to 60%. For data that's super repetitive, like daily analytics logs, the savings can be enormous. Look at that, almost 60% in this benchmark. That translates directly into smaller API bills.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just about the cost. The official benchmarks claim TOON can actually make these models smarter. In a data retrieval task, TOON apparently boosted the model's accuracy from around 65% with JSON to over 70%. The theory is that the super explicit, clean structure helps the model understand the data more reliably. So let's get this straight. Lower costs and better performance? It really does sound like the perfect solution. But, with any new tech that makes claims this bold, we have to ask, is it the whole story? We need to look a little closer at the data. Okay, so let's start with the official benchmark data. This is the stuff that got everybody so excited. And you can see why. Compared to standard JSON, TOON is claiming higher accuracy while using almost 40% fewer tokens. That is a really powerful combination of efficiency and comprehension. But then, an independent test run by improvingagents.com paints a very different picture. When they tested this on the GPT 4.1-Nano model, TOON's accuracy actually dropped a lot. It ranked 9th out of 12 different formats, performing worse than standard JSON. So what on earth is going on here? Well, the discrepancy really highlights a classic engineering trade-off. It seems the results can vary a lot depending on which model you're using and what you're asking it to do. You have to remember, most of these models have been trained on just mountains and mountains of JSON data.
So the extreme compression of TOON, while super efficient, might be so unfamiliar that it actually makes it harder for some models to understand correctly, leading to worse accuracy.
So this brings us to the most important takeaway of all. This is not about picking an absolute winner. It's not turn versus JSON fight to the death. It's about understanding that you now have another tool in your toolkit. And the real key is knowing exactly when to pull it out. So here's a simple little checklist for you. You should seriously think about using TOON if your situation ticks these 3 boxes. 1. Your data is highly uniform and basically looks like a table. Think of things like user lists or analytics logs. 2. Token cost and API latency are critical problems you absolutely have to solve. And 3. You control both ends of the pipe. You can create the TOON data and you know the system on the other side can understand it. If that sounds like you, TOON could be a total game changer.
But for a whole lot of other cases, JSON is still the undisputed champion. If you're building a public API, or you have to integrate with old systems, or you're dealing with really complex, irregular, messy data, you just stick with JSON. It's the safer, more compatible choice, and its ecosystem of tools and validators is it's unmatched. This means the smartest path forward for most of us is probably a hybrid one. You keep your internal systems, your databases, and your standard APIs running on good old JSON for its universal compatibility. But then, right at that last, most expensive step, right before you're about to send a huge chunk of data to an LLM, that's when you convert it to TOON. You get all the cost and latency benefits without having to re-engineer your entire system. And this whole thing leaves us with a final and, I think, a really fascinating question. For decades, formats like JSON have really prioritized being readable by humans. But as we build more and more systems where machines are the ones doing most of the talking, does that priority start to shift? TOON is definitely a step in that direction, and it forces us to ask, what does the future of data even look like when we're optimizing not for ourselves, but for the AIs we're talking to?